Right now, the number one prospect in all of baseball is your national center fielder slash right fielder, Dylan Crews, and he did make his debut in 2024. But let's get into a season breakdown. Did he live up to your expectations of being the number one prospect in baseball? We'll discuss after this.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as our show page at LO_Nationals for all your latest Nationals news and notes. Make sure to check us out over on Twitter. And while you're at it, search up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcasts, including over on YouTube. Again, search Locked On Nationals on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Hit that subscriber button as well. And of course, over on YouTube as well for the second time there. Later on in today's show, we'll preview the ALDS and the NLDS starting tonight. We've got game threes with the Yankees dropping some pretty serious, there's been some feathers that have been ruffled in that Yankees-Royals series. We'll discuss that a little bit later on as they have game three tonight in Kansas City. And of course, last night's game as well, the Padres, they ain't going down without a fight. I can tell you that much right then and there. But we start off discussing Dylan Crews' 2024 season breakdown and then also get into what 2025 could look like for the number one prospect in all of baseball. But before we get into it, today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, the right state can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. So we get started discussing Dylan Crews' 2024 season. And to kind of set the tone here, Dylan Crews wasn't overly impressive. And I think we all can kind of understand that point. When Dylan Crews was first called up earlier on this August, I mean, the expectations were pretty damn high for the kid. And kind of looking back into it, if you look at his total season numbers and how he finished the year, batting .218 with a 641 OPS, that's pretty pedestrian numbers. And I think we all kind of understand that. But also, this is kind of one thing that, again, we've talked about it a lot with different prospects. I think sitting here today, James Wood and Dylan Crews, the discussion there, this time last year, I was telling you that Dylan Crews will be the better overall player. That's just what I thought. Now I think sitting here today, I think it's pretty clear that James Wood is the better player over Dylan Crews. And that was always going to be the comparison between the two. So we saw James Wood in his red-hot start as soon as he got called up to the majors. And I think that kind of gave us like a kind of unfair expectation for Dylan Crews. Because Dylan Crews was touted as the can't-miss prospect. So he was going to come in, he could make the majors even this time last year and make an impact up for the Nationals. That's what we all thought. But that really wasn't the case. Dylan Crews had that awesome first week, in which, by the way, he was really good in. But really over the course of the season, as the game started to stack up, it became pretty clear that Dylan Crews is not here to make some instant impact right away. But there are some good things to really kind of get into as far as Dylan Crews go. Number one, I think the most impressive thing, and it's kind of funny thinking this, the most impressive thing that Dylan Crews brought to the table was his defense. Dylan Crews, I think, is a Gold Glove caliber right fielder out there. And I think we saw that in a lot of different scenarios. Number one, and we saw this his opening night, his first game as a National, he has a rocket arm. That is not really something that was really treasured by prospects or really scouts overall when it comes to Dylan Crews. We always talked about his contact ability, which stands true today, but no one really raved about how good this guy was defensively. Dylan Cruz is a very good defensive outfielder. And if you remember back a year and a half ago around draft time, that's what kind of people were wondering, like, is this guy really that good defensively? We all knew that he was going to be pretty above average, I guess you could say, as far as center fielders go. But some people were kind of skeptical about where he would play. Well, he played in right field for a majority of this season. Jacob Young was manning center field, and that makes all the sense in the world. Jacob Young is one of the best defensive center fielders in all of baseball at this point. But I think with Dylan Cruz, though, as far as his first 31 games that he played as a National, I was not expecting to be sitting here today touting his defense. That was really kind of a surprise for me, to be honest. And looking and watching him down in the minors, I do think that he was always a lot better defensively than what we would have expected. But still, Dylan Cruz was really good defensively. Now let's get into some things that may have surprised us a little bit, including some of the numbers that he put up. First and foremost, in 2024, even down in AA and AAA, Dylan Cruz was really not all that impressive at the plate. He was good. He was someone that deserved to be a top 10 prospect in all of baseball. But when you think top 10 prospect, you think of like James Wood putting up like a 990 OPS and hitting a ton of home runs. Dylan Cruz wasn't really doing that too much. He had 13 home runs across AA and AAA this year in 100 games. He batted .270. A 451 slug and a 792 OPS across AA and AAA as well. That's not all that impressive if you really kind of get into it. And also, by the way, he grounded into 4 double plays across AA and AAA in 100 games. He grounded into 4 double plays for the Washington Nationals in just 31 games. I was kind of expecting Dylan Cruz to hit the ground running and maybe adjust to Major League pitching at a much quicker rate. But one thing kind of stood true. Dylan Cruz at the plate, they still treated him like the Dylan Cruz back at LSU. And what I mean by that is he went through a rate of like 20 straight at-bats where I believe he only saw 3 fastballs. Pitchers attacked him in a way that you have not even seen James Wood been attacked that way yet. They gave him like the respect of a veteran, big league ready kind of bat. And I do think Dylan Cruz was quote unquote big league ready, but also to see him get that treatment, I think that probably threw him for a loop a little bit. And that may have kind of skewed his numbers in a way that we weren't really expecting. Because if I'm being honest, I did expect Dylan Cruz to hit the ball and hit it pretty well at the major league level. The exit velocity was okay. You saw at times where his launch angle and really his first few games, I think he did make some adjustments in the second week of the season, which allowed him to hit a lot better after his first week. But sitting here today, I do think a lot of Nationals fans are kind of skeptical of what Cruz could be. Not saying that he's not going to be an all-star player. I think he will be. I think he could be in 2025, by the way. But there are some weird expectations when it comes to Cruz. And it's hard to really break down his season when, number one, he only played in 31 games up in the majors. And also, number two, he really wasn't all that great, I will say, in the minor leagues this year. The numbers are good, but when you are raved to be the best contact hitter in the minor leagues, he put the ball in play, but he also did strike out a fair amount. He didn't really walk all too much either, by the way. He walked a fair amount down in the minors, 36 times over 2 different leagues with AA and AAA. That was really it. And up in the majors, he's had 11 walks to 26 strikeouts, 92 strikeouts in 100 games in AA and AAA. So as far as Dylan Cruz goes, like, he was good. He was impressive. But once he got up to the majors, it was pretty clear that he's still just learning to be an everyday pro player. And I do think there is an adjustment when it comes to even some of the best prospects like Dylan Cruz. So as far as his 2024 breakdowns go, am I surprised by his kind of underwhelming value up in the bigs at this point at the plate, yeah, I'm a little surprised. But also at the end of the day, he's still a young prospect and he's still going to be learning how to play every single day, which there is an adjustment period to that. But for some more exciting stuff, Dylan Cruz is still and finished the number one prospect in all of baseball, even in MLB Pipeline's updated rankings. So how good can Dylan Cruz be in 2025? What are your expectations for him? Well, let's get into that. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you guys about some of our very good friends over at FanDuel. And of course, hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Maybe you want to bet on the Commanders this weekend taking on Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Well, I can tell you this. My hunch is I've got an Austin Eckler anytime touchdown. And of course, I'm going to ride with Jaden Daniels anytime rushing touchdown as well. They have been a historically good rushing offense in the red zone. So when you do that, and if you haven't downloaded FanDuel, download it today at FanDuel.com and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. We can place your first $5 bet. Again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Again, download America's #1 sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel.com and hit that download button. Now, I'm going to tell you guys about our friends over at Gametime. And of course, Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can tell you this, I am looking at Commanders Panthers tickets as we sit here today, and they have got some great flash zone deals. And of course, I get the image views right there at my phone so I can see if there's any obstruction, because one thing about FedEx Field or Northwest Stadium, I may say, there are obstructed views, as you all probably know at this point in time. Well, Gametime, they can give me the exact view of my seats so I can tell where exactly everything is. And of course, I will not miss a damn thing of the action. And that is the best thing about our friends over at Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. So let's get into it with Dylan Cruz in 2025. Will Dylan Cruz live up to his hype in 2025? And by the hype, I mean one of the best hitters in all of baseball. Someone who is going to bat 290 to 300 someday and maybe even win a batting title. That is really the hype around Dylan Cruz. I think Dylan Cruz can live up to that hype, but I do not think it will be in 2025. But I will say, I do think he will show you a much better / more improved version of Dylan Cruz than what we saw this season. And I think a lot of different things will help out in that. Here's a kind of a list of things that I want to see with Dylan Cruz in 2025 and kind of getting into what we could see in this offseason. Number one, protection. I think with C.J. Abrams, James Wood, and Dylan Cruz as your top three kind of hitters in your lineup, while you may not see the vision in the present, while C.J. Abrams was sent down for the final week, James Wood went through some struggles here lately, and Dylan Cruz went through his own struggles as well. But I think that you can see those three guys as your top three batters for years to come. I don't think many people would complain about that, by the way. But getting extra protection in there, whether it's a Pete Alonso, who, by the way, went yard again yesterday, whether it is a Anthony Santander from the Baltimore Orioles, and you sign him to a nice little deal as he had a breakout season yet again for the Birds. If you get an extra bat in this lineup, and maybe also add in a Brady House by midseason next year, then we could be really cooking with gas here in DC. And I think with Dylan Cruz, he's kind of one of those guys who will always be circled on the lineup card for opposing pitchers. We saw it this year. we got into it with number one, pitchers saw what Dylan Cruz can and can't do. Number one, he can hit the fastball. Number two, he can't hit the breaking ball. Getting protection in there and having guys in that lineup card where you're going to have to pitch around a Pete Alonso or pitch around a James Wood or even a CJ Abrams who has hit the breaking ball a little bit better this year, and taking that pressure off of Dylan Cruz, that will pay dividends in the end, in my opinion. So number one, getting protection to help Dylan Cruz, I think will be a huge jump for the kid moving forward. Number two, getting him in the correct lineup spot. You saw Dylan Cruz bounce around from leadoff, second, batting sixth, really wherever it was, Dylan Cruz batted in that spot. And I think we saw a lot of different times this season where, again, I've got the notes right here. He batted first, he batted second, fifth, sixth, and seventh. Way too much bouncing around. Most of the time, he did bat leadoff, and I do think that is not really the best position for the guy. I think Dylan Cruz is naturally a number two or a number three. That is just what I think at this point. And you all know what I've always kind of thought of this. I think if the Nationals were to really kind of utilize the guys that they have right now, the lineup and what it should be is CJ Abrams batting first, Dylan Cruz batting second, and James Wood batting third. For multiple different reasons, by the way. This is kind of the traditional way to think with baseball nowadays, and it may be polarizing, as we all know, in the day of analytics and everyone talks about the numbers and everything. I do as well. But I think CJ Abrams, having him bat leadoff, and Dylan Cruz batting second, James Wood batting third, lefty, righty, lefty. You're going to have to make bullpen decisions for other managers. They're going to have to think about the lefty-righty matchups and how they want to maneuver that, especially with today's day and age. Guys coming out of the bullpen, you've got to face three batters in the regular season. You have to. There's a rule there. You can't do otherwise at this point. So making those decisions a little bit tougher for managers out there when you have three potential lethal hitters. Again, CJ Abrams was an all-star this year. James Wood has the capability to hit 40 to 50 home runs in a season. And Dylan Cruz has the potential to hit a batting crown someday. That's going to be a tough decision for managers now. And you're not just going to have to go after Dylan Cruz if he's batting fifth and batting behind Ildemaro Vargas or whoever it is. Dylan Cruz has a ton of potential. A ton. But I do think if you were to kind of maneuver this lineup a little bit and bat him second, I do think that is where you'll see the best version of Dylan Cruz and also the best version of this Nationals lineup. And again, the numbers may not fully support that because in 6 games where he batted second this year, he batted 174 with a 414 OPS. Didn't have any extra base hits, but it's a small sample size. I think over time, you'll see that gel and you'll start to see Dylan Cruz kind of live up to his hype and really be the number one prospect in all of baseball at this point. Also, to get into some 2025 projections for Cruz and kind of what I expect from him, I think Dylan Cruz this season will be very similar to what you saw in AA and AAA from this year. I don't think Dylan Cruz is going to put up like huge machine-like numbers at the plate. What I expect from Cruz this year is batting around 275, which is really good. Maybe with the OBP around 340, which is solid. And have a slugging like around a 450 at this point. I think he finishes like around a 790 OPS in 2025. Now, again, for that to happen, it's not just on him. It's going to have to be on Davey Martinez and Mike Rizzo and how they surround him with this roster. Because again, there's a lot of different things to choose from with this Nationals team. There's a lot of different factors that go into making a lineup and curating it around your three kind of core guys with CJ Abrams, Dylan Cruz, and lastly, James Wood. We'll see what the Nationals do. But again, there's a lot of pressure on the Nationals to kind of fix this thing around because you do have the talent, you've got the prospects, and your 3 core guys are already up in the majors, you're going to have to see what the Nats can do in free agency or the trade market, or ultimately see what they do with Brady House, because I think that'll be a storyline this offseason, and see what the Nationals will decide to do with that third baseman there. And also Yohandy Morales is in the fold as well, for someone who could crack the major league lineup as soon as maybe next June, depending on how he starts. But we'll see how the Nationals decide that. Until then, we'll just have to see how the offseason unfolds. Next, let's tell you guys about the ALDS and the NLDS, as of course, you have got action tonight with, oh man, just a loaded matchup of games today. You've got all 4 games today. You've got the Guardians and the Tigers kicking off at 3:08. Then you've got the Phillies and the Mets at 5:08. Royals and the Yankees at 7:08. And then the Dodgers and the Padres, which San Diego could wrap it up tonight. And of course, the Mets could as well. Wild day ahead of us as we get ready for postseason baseball. But before we get into it, I'm going to tell you guys about our friends over at Booking.com. And this episode of Locked On Nationals is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah, and explore those U.S. cities that you always secretly wanted to learn more about, whether it's a hotel and bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball's rival city during postseason. Maybe it's time to taste your baseball competition stadium cuisine, because the Nationals Park, they've got a very good stadium cuisine there. But luckily on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's just right for you to check out that stadium food. With Booking.com's wide variety of choices across the U.S., you can go incognito to all your baseball rival cities, including New York, San Diego, LA, wherever it is. We've got some nice little destination cities right here for you, and Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay just for you. And Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your home team's or rivals' stadium. So, as we were saying, the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. We get back into it with discussing the loaded slate of games today, as you have got a wild slate of games. All 4 games here, and you have the Mets, who have the opportunity to put away those nasty Philadelphia Phillies, and you also have the opportunity to see the Padres take on the Dodgers for a little late night baseball. And some of the pitching matchups are still to be determined, but at this point in time, let's start off with game 1 of the day. The Guardians and the Tigers, game 3, the series is all tied up at 1 apiece. On the hill for Cleveland, you've got the veteran who has been there before, Alex Cobb, 37 years old, a 2.76 ERA on the season. And Detroit is believed to go with a bullpen game today. That is what they have been doing over the last few games. You saw them do it in the postseason as well against the Houston Astros. So that'll be an interesting series. But ultimately, I think the Tigers are kind of creeping up on teams in a way that we weren't really expecting. They are the red-hot team going into the postseason. I think the Tigers could go up 2-1 easily on Cleveland. Detroit will be rocking today. Hopefully it's a nice day. I haven't checked the weather up in Detroit, but still, what an incredible slate of games today, starting with them. Then you get to the Phillies and the Mets. Ranger Suarez versus Jose Quintana. I mean, lefty on lefty action. Phillies, Mets. I hate to say it, but I'm not rooting for any of these teams. The Mets could easily put away the Phillies. And I'm not rooting for the Mets, but I'm definitely not rooting for the Phillies, if you know what I mean. So if you were to ask me, who would you prefer to see move on? I'd much rather see the Mets. Then after that, between the Dodgers and the Padres, which I don't really like either of those teams, to be honest, I'll root for whoever wins that series as well over the Phillies or the Mets. So that's my rooting interest in this, but I think that's going to be a very interesting game. The baseball world has had all their eyes on this Phillies-Mets series, and also for the Nationals, our former friend Jesse Winker had a towering home run yesterday, in which, by the way, can we just say this? Jesse Winker is just one of those guys where if he's yours, you love to have him. But if he's playing against you or really in any other team, you hate the guy. He was a great guy to have here in DC. I do think the Nationals enjoyed their time with him. Jesse Winker was awesome in the first half of the season for the Nats. He really had that renaissance year. And I talked to him also in spring training. Couldn't have been a nicer guy to talk with. But, man, he is a heel, and you do not want to be going up against that guy. But speaking of that, you don't want to be going up against another former Nat with Juan Soto, who takes on the Kansas City Royals tonight with Seth Lugo on the bump against Clark Schmidt for the New York Yankees. And listen, I've kind of been saying this. I would not be surprised to see the New York Yankees get bounced this round. And that is surprising to a lot of people, but I guess we'll just see what happens. And then tonight, the recap. I mean, we'll see what happens with the Padres and the Dodgers. It's going to be a wild one. Postseason baseball has been awesome at this point. We'll see if the Mets can put the Phillies away today. And then, of course, we'll see if the Padres can do it tonight against those pesky Dodgers. So I will catch you guys on the flip side. Have a good one. Go Nats.